I was recently reading the story of a woman undertaking a pilgrimage who described an encounter she had with another pilgrim. This other pilgrim was on a bike, heavily laden as he was carrying a tent and other camping equipment with him, and his pet cat as well. He'd already travelled nearly 2,500 kilometres on his way to Santiago. The woman asked him, "Where do you live then?" And the man replied, "Wherever I am." This conversation has been stuck in my head for the last couple of weeks, and particularly came to the fore this week as I was reading something that Henri Nouwen had written. He wrote, "How much longer will I live? Only one thing seems clear to me. Every day should be well lived. What a simple truth. Still, it is worthy of my attention." These words about living well seem to be particularly relevant at the moment as we're aware of the daily increase in confirmed cases of COVID-19, and we hear news of more and more areas entering some kind of local lockdown. The thought that within the next few weeks or months we too may find ourselves to some extent back where we were a few months ago is perhaps rather difficult to contemplate. Many people will no doubt be wondering, how will we manage? Practically, emotionally, mentally and spiritually. How can we live well in such circumstances? How can we not just exist, but how can we thrive and flourish? How can we, like the pilgrim on his bike, learn to truly live where we are? The fact is that many of us, either regularly or just on some occasions, settle for something that is less than living well. We might be able to blame this on situation or circumstance, but I don't really think we have an excuse to make a lot of excuses. I believe that God wants us all to live well every day, wherever we are, and whatever is going on around us, and that can be really difficult. A couple of years ago, I was involved with the writing group for the World Day of Prayer, and we spent several days away together, immersed in Jeremiah chapter 29. This is another passage that has come to my mind many times over recent months. The people are in exile and are wondering when they will be able to return to their homeland and normal lives again. And God tells Jeremiah to write to them and to tell them to settle down in Babylon. They're to build houses and plant gardens and get married and have children, and they're to let their children get married and have children, and in about 70 years' time, they'll be able to return. In other words, they are to live well in the place of exile. They're to live fruitful lives. They're to bloom where they're planted. The end of exile will not be in sight for a long time, but this should not stop them from living well in the meantime. And they are to pray for the welfare of this new place where they are to settle and make their home in the interim. So in the light of this, I do believe that we need to learn to live well in restricted circumstances. And I believe that those of us who are people who pray need to not simply be praying for a way through and a return to the normal as fast as possible, but for ways in which this might be a time of blessing and learning and growth and fruitfulness. We can't pretend that 2020 doesn't exist. We can't jump from what was normal in 2019 to an unknown point in the future when everything is restored, because actually that might never happen. This feeling of living in the interim or in the margin between two worlds could last for years, so it's not healthy or practical to ignore it or to try to hurry through it. We have to learn to make it our home. And I'm going to quote Henri Nouwen twice again now, as he has featured heavily in my week. The first quote is this: "We have to keep asking ourselves, what does it all mean? What is God trying to tell us? How are we called to live in the midst of all this? Without such questions, our lives become numb and flat." And this is the second: "The real enemies of our life are the oughts and the ifs. They pull us backwards into the unalterable past and forward into the unpredictable future. But real life takes place in the here and now." There is a man I've known for a very long time, and I can honestly say that I think he is the saddest man I've ever met. He suffered from an illness a number of years ago that meant that he was unable to continue with many of the things that he enjoyed in life. And he has never quite got over the shock of that. So he still talks about the things that have been taken away from him and the things that he can't do. and it seems to me such a shame that he can't move on. I feel that he's had decades to learn to try and live differently, to discover new things in which to find joy and fulfillment. But in some ways, he seems to have chosen not to live at all. He dwells in memories of what he used to have, of all the things that have been snatched from him. And so he is perpetually angry and unfulfilled. And it's not just people who can get stuck in memories of the past. Nations and churches also can get stuck in these rosy memories. If we're discontent with where we are now, then it's easy to fall into golden age thinking, often falsely remembering a time when everything was so much better. The construction of a golden age is one of the amazing things our imaginations can do, but generally these perfect bygone days have never actually existed. They're pure fabrication. The danger with this is that we fail to live in the present. We fail to live today because we're always looking behind or ahead. As a result, our today is dry and empty, or filled with bitterness and resentment at what we perceive to be missed opportunities or unfulfilled potential. There is a contestant on the Great British Bake Off at the moment who lost his leg in an accident a few years ago. He's spoken about the value he has found in the practice of mindfulness, of trying to dwell in the present moment rather than worrying about the future or fixating on the past. And you do sometimes catch him taking a mindful moment in the bake-off kitchen to ground himself in the here and now so that he can make the best of the present. He generally does appear to be one of the calmer, more controlled contestants. It's so easy to lose sight of the present moment. Sometimes whole days, if not weeks, go by and I look back and wonder where on earth I was during all of this. So I know that I'm not always very good at living well, at living wherever I am. I try very hard to do it when I'm with other people. I do want people to feel that they have my full attention and that I'm not distracted, that my head isn't somewhere else. But perhaps I'm less careful when I'm on my own. I know there are days when I just want to get to the end of it, and that's often because I'm worrying about something that I've said or done, or I'm worrying about something that's coming up. Some days I choose to mope and be miserable for no obvious reason. Some days I decide to feel sorry for myself and I actively wallow in self-pity. Some days just seem a bit frantic and I daren't stop to think or to notice anything else that's going on outside my diary. These are all choices that I make, I know. And actually these are the days that I enjoy the least. These are the days when I feel unfulfilled and anxious and dissatisfied. These are the days when I don't feel at home in myself. I think living well has everything to do with a state of mind and heart and very little to do with external circumstances. I think we can all live well if we aim to find the blessing in each action and decision we undertake, and if we seek to marvel at the miracle that is held in each potential moment. I think we can all live well if we swap a tendency towards disgruntlement for an attitude of gratitude. I think we can all live well if we turn our attention away from ourselves, acknowledging that the world doesn't revolve around us, and if instead we look outwards in acts of caring and compassion for one another, and in acts of love and worship to God. So this week I'm challenged to make each moment count, even if that's time at the gym or in the kitchen or when I'm picking up my crochet. What's going on in my mind and my heart when I'm doing all of these daily activities? On my good days, at these times, my focus turns to God in thankfulness and worship. But on other days, I seem to get stuck in a negative loop. And I know that if I dwell on all the days when I think I haven't lived well, all I'm really doing is just perpetuating that cycle of guilt and recrimination. So I'm aware that I need to try more and more to put those days and the memory of those days away. Well, I've looked in my diary at what's ahead this week and it's not pretty. But I don't want to get to this time next week and wonder what's happened or collapse in exhaustion because it feels like I've tumbled down a helter-skelter. So I'm praying for the right attitude and focus, and I'm asking that I can make each moment count. And I'm hoping that I can learn more and more to live well. And even in those times when I don't manage to get it right, I'm challenged to choose to make changes and be different. And I'm going to end with one more quote from Henri Nouwen. Each day holds a surprise, but only if we expect it can we see, hear or feel it when it comes to us. Let's not be afraid to receive each day's surprise, whether it comes to us as sorrow or as joy. It will open a new place in our heart, a place where we can welcome new friends and celebrate more fully our shared humanity. And that, in my opinion, is what it is to live well.